It's strange, really, how invisible you can become when you're dressed in rags. The streets transform you, strip you of identity, turn you into just another face in a sea of hardship. I sit there, on that same cold corner, my knees drawn up to my chest, my hand outstretched as though I truly need what I already possess in excess. The people walk past, their gazes fixed ahead, their expressions carefully indifferent. And for a moment, I feel like I don't exist. But I do exist. When the day ends and the streetlights flicker on, I rise from the pavement, brush off the grime, and walk the 10 blocks to my penthouse apartment. My shoes, scuffed and weathered for the part, carry me across cracked sidewalks and polished lobbies, up an elevator that smells faintly of lavender and wood polish, and into a world that couldn't be more different from the one I've just left. Inside, the air is warm, still. My living room overlooks the city skyline, the lights glittering like diamonds against the dark. My marble countertops are spotless, my wine rack filled with bottles that cost more than what I've collected on the streets in a week. I can't explain exactly why I do it. Maybe it started as an experiment, a way to see the world from a perspective so foreign to my own. Or maybe it was guilt, some subconscious attempt to absolve myself for the privilege I'd stumbled into. My success was born of cunning, yes, but also luck. And I'd often wondered, if I'd been dealt a different hand, would I have survived out there? Would I have been strong enough? At first, it felt empowering to disappear into that other world, to observe humanity from its margins. But over time, something shifted. It wasn't just an act anymore. I began to feel the loneliness, the helplessness. I began to understand, in some small way, what it was to be forgotten. Every morning, I transform myself. My hair, usually coiffed and gleaming, becomes a tangled mess. My tailored jackets are replaced with threadbare coats that hang loosely on my frame. I smear a little dirt on my face, just enough to complete the illusion. And then I step outside, leaving my world of opulence behind. The walk to my chosen corner is always the same. The air is colder there, sharper, as though the city's warmth doesn't reach those few blocks. I pass by office workers rushing to jobs they hate, mothers pulling children towards school, young couples holding hands. I wonder if they see me, if they sense the truth beneath the facade. But no one ever does. To them, I'm just another figure blending into the background. It was on one of those days, gray, bitterly cold, with a wind that bit at my skin, that he appeared. I'd been sitting on the corner for hours, my fingers numb and my body aching from the unforgiving pavement. The foot traffic had thinned, the weather driving most people indoors. I was about to call it a day when I noticed him, a boy, no older than 9 or 10, walking toward me. At first, I thought he might pass by like everyone else. But then he stopped, standing just a few feet away, his eyes wide and curious. He was small, with a mop of brown hair and a coat that looked 2 sizes too big for him. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence between us broken only by the whistle of the wind. "You look cold," he said finally, his voice soft but steady. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. Cold? Of course I was cold. I was always cold out here. But it wasn't real, not for me. Did he think? Before I could say anything, he shrugged off his jacket and held it out to me. The sight of it, the threadbare fabric, the frayed cuffs, hit me like a punch to the gut. I could see that it wasn't new, that it had probably been handed down or bought second-hand. And yet, here he was, offering it to me without hesitation. "I'm fine," I said quickly, my voice trembling. "You don't need to." "You need it more," he insisted, stepping closer. His cheeks were red from the cold, his breath visible in the frigid air. "My mom says it's good to share." My chest tightened, a wave of guilt crashing over me. This boy, who had so little, was willing to give up what little he had for someone he thought needed it more. And I was sitting here, playing a role, pretending to be something I wasn't. I took the jacket, my hands shaking. "Thank you," I managed to say, though the words felt hollow. He smiled, a small, innocent smile that only deepened the ache in my chest. Stay warm, he said before turning and walking away, his thin sweater flapping in the wind. I watched him go, the jacket heavy in my hands. For the first time since I'd started this charade, I felt truly ashamed. That evening, as I walked back to my penthouse, the jacket still clutched tightly in my hands, I couldn't stop thinking about the boy. His kindness, his selflessness, it had pierced through the walls I'd built around myself, leaving me raw and exposed. I had wanted to understand the struggles of others, to see the world from their perspective. But in that moment, I realized how shallow my efforts had been. I wasn't helping anyone. I was just playing a part. And now, I had to make it right. The boy's jacket hung over the back of a chair in my living room, its presence impossible to ignore. I had placed it there when I returned to the penthouse, unsure of what to do with it. Every time I looked at it, I felt a sharp pang of guilt. That jacket was more than just a piece of clothing, it was a symbol of kindness, of sacrifice. And it had been given to me under false pretenses. I spent the night tossing and turning, replaying the encounter in my mind. His small hands offering the jacket, his earnest smile, the innocence in his voice when he said, "My mom says it's good to share." He had no idea who I really was, no idea that I would return to a warm apartment while he braved the cold in a threadbare sweater. The realization gnawed at me. For years, I had told myself that my time on the streets was a way to connect with humanity, to understand a life so far removed from my own. But in truth, I had been indulging in a kind of voyeurism, dipping my toes into suffering without truly feeling its depths. And now, that boy's selflessness had shattered the illusion I had built for myself. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep the jacket, it wasn't mine to take. I needed to find the boy, to return it, to thank him properly. And perhaps, in doing so, I could begin to make amends for the deception I had allowed to grow unchecked. The first step was figuring out where he might have come from. The corner where I usually sat was near a cluster of low-income housing units, and I guessed that he might live in one of them. It wasn't much to go on, but it was a start. I dressed carefully that morning, blending elements of my two worlds. I wore simple jeans and a warm coat, sturdy boots that could handle the icy sidewalks, but left my jewelry and designer bag behind. I didn't want to stand out, didn't want to draw attention to myself. This wasn't about me, it was about him. The housing complex was a maze of identical brick buildings, their exteriors worn but not unwelcoming. Children played in the snow-covered courtyards, their laughter mingling with the faint hum of traffic from the nearby street. I felt a flicker of hope as I scanned their faces, but none of them resembled the boy. I approached a woman who was sitting on a bench, bundled in layers, her hands clutching a steaming cup of coffee. "Excuse me," I said, my breath visible in the cold air. "I'm looking for a boy, around 10 years old, brown hair. I think he might live around here." She gave me a wary look, her eyes narrowing slightly. "What's this about?" I hesitated, realizing how strange I must sound. "He did something kind for me, and I just want to thank him," I said honestly. "It's important." Her expression softened slightly, and she nodded toward one of the buildings. "Could be Joey. He's always helping people. Lives in 3B with his mom." The name struck something in me, Joey. It suited him, though I wasn't sure why. I thanked the woman and made my way to the building she had indicated. The stairwell smelled faintly of mildew, the walls scuffed and covered with peeling paint. I climbed to the 3rd floor, my heart pounding with each step. When I reached apartment 3B, I hesitated. What would I say? How would they react? Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the door. It opened a moment later, revealing a woman in her 30s, her dark hair pulled back into a messy ponytail. She looked tired but kind, her expression curious as she took me in. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Hi," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm looking for Joey. I think I met him yesterday." Her brow furrowed. "Joey? What's this about?" I wanted to thank him," I said, holding up the jacket. "He gave me this, and Mom? Who is it?" The boy's voice came from behind her, and a moment later, he appeared at her side. His eyes widened slightly when he saw me, recognition flashing across his face. "Hi, Joey," I said, crouching slightly so I was at his eye level. "I just wanted to see you again and say thank you. What you did yesterday, it meant a lot to me." He shifted on his feet, clearly embarrassed but also pleased. "It wasn't a big deal," he mumbled. "You looked cold." "It was a big deal," I said firmly. "It was incredibly kind. And I wanted to give this back to you, it's yours." He shook his head, his small face resolute. "You need it more than I do." Tears stung my eyes at his words, the simplicity of his generosity cutting through me like a blade. I glanced up at his mother, who was watching the exchange with a mix of pride and confusion. "I need to tell you something," I said, directing my words to both of them. "I'm not who you think I am. I'm not homeless. I've been pretending, trying to understand what it's like." But Joey didn't know that. He saw someone in need, and he didn't hesitate to help. That kind of kindness, it's rare, and it's extraordinary. The words spilled out before I could stop them, my confession raw and unvarnished. Joey's mother looked at me in surprise, her expression unreadable. "You're not homeless?" she asked. "No," I admitted. "I live nearby. But meeting Joey, it changed me. I want to do something for him. For both of you." Her face softened, though I could see the hesitation in her eyes. "You don't have to do anything," she said. "We're fine." "I know," I said. "But I'd like to, if you'll let me." Joey looked up at his mother, then back at me. "Can we get hot chocolate?" he asked, his voice hopeful. I smiled, the knot in my chest loosening slightly. "We can do that. And a lot more." I returned to my penthouse that evening with a newfound sense of purpose. Joey's simple request for hot chocolate lingered in my mind, its innocence and warmth contrasting sharply with the weight I'd been carrying. It wasn't about grand gestures for him, it was about connection, about something as small as a shared moment of comfort. The next day, I called one of my assistants, a trusted confidant who had worked with me for years. "I need to set up a fund," I said. Quietly. "Something for a family I've recently met." She didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer any details. Together, we worked out the logistics, a trust in Joey's name managed discreetly, to ensure that his education and well-being would be secured. It wasn't charity, it was an acknowledgement of a debt I couldn't ignore. But it wasn't enough. Joey's act of kindness had shown me the depth of his character, and I wanted to honor that in a way that went beyond money. A few days later, I found myself standing outside Joey's apartment building again, this time with a bag of groceries in one hand and a promise in my heart. His mother, Michelle, opened the door, her expression softening when she saw me. "Hi," I said, smiling nervously. "I hope I'm not intruding." "No, not at all," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "Joey will be thrilled to see you." The apartment was modest but tidy, its walls adorned with photographs of Joey and his family. It radiated warmth, a stark contrast to the cold streets I had spent so much time on. Joey appeared moments later, his face lighting up when he saw me. "You came back," he said, rushing over to give me a hug. The sincerity of his welcome nearly brought tears to my eyes. We spent the afternoon together, sharing hot chocolate and stories. Joey told me about school, his favorite books, and his dreams of becoming an inventor. His enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself laughing more than I had in years. Michelle watched us with quiet pride, her eyes glistening as Joey animatedly described his latest project, a contraption he was building out of old bicycle parts. "You're raising an incredible boy," I said to her as Joey ran to fetch one of his sketches. She smiled, though there was a hint of weariness in her expression. "He's my world," she said softly. "I just want to give him the opportunities he deserves." Hearing her words solidified my resolve. I couldn't change the past, couldn't erase the guilt that Joey's generosity had awakened in me, but I could use my resources to make a difference in their lives. I'd like to help, I said. If you'll let me. Michelle hesitated, her brow furrowing slightly. You've already done so much, spending time with Joey, showing him he matters. That's enough. I want to do more, I said firmly. Joey has so much potential, and I want to make sure he has every opportunity to succeed. It's not charity, it's an investment in a future that I believe in. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. Finally, she nodded. If it's really about Joey, then thank you. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I enrolled Joey in an after-school STEM program, something he had mentioned dreaming about but never thought was possible. I also arranged for Michelle to receive job training and support through a local nonprofit I had quietly funded for years. Watching their lives slowly shift, their burdens lighten, filled me with a sense of fulfillment I hadn't felt in decades. But as much as I was giving, I was receiving just as much. Spending time with Joey and Michelle reminded me of the humanity I had distanced myself from, the connections I had forsaken in pursuit of success. Their kindness, their resilience, their joy, it all grounded me in a way I hadn't expected. One afternoon, as Joey and I worked on one of his inventions, a makeshift wind turbine he was determined to perfect, he looked up at me with a serious expression. Why do you help us? He asked. Is it because you felt bad? The question caught me off guard, and I paused, the screwdriver in my hand hovering over the machine. At first, maybe, I admitted. But now, it's because I care about you. You showed me something I had forgotten, that kindness matters, even in the smallest ways. And I want to make sure you never lose that. Joey nodded thoughtfully, then grinned. Okay. But you should know, I would have helped you even if you weren't nice. His words made me laugh, the sound ringing out in the small apartment. I'll keep that in mind. As the weeks turned into months, my visits with Joey and Michelle became a regular part of my life. The penthouse, once a symbol of my isolation, now felt less like a fortress and more like a reminder of how much I had to give. I began to see the world differently, not as a collection of challenges to conquer, but as a web of connections waiting to be strengthened. Joey's jacket still hung in my living room, a silent testament to the moment that had changed everything. It wasn't just a piece of clothing, it was a symbol of the boy who had reminded me of the power of generosity, of the humanity I had lost touch with. One evening, as I walked home after dinner with Joey and Michelle, I stopped at my usual corner, the one where I had spent so many hours pretending. The pavement was as cold and unyielding as ever, the city's indifference as palpable as it had always been. But I no longer felt the need to sit there, to pretend to be someone I wasn't. Joey had given me something far greater than I had ever hoped to find, a reason to use my wealth, my privilege, for good. The next few months marked a profound shift in my life. The penthouse no longer felt like a monument to my success, but rather a staging ground for something far more meaningful. The spark ignited by Joey's kindness had grown into a fire, consuming the shallow motivations that had once driven me. I was no longer content to hoard wealth and watch the world from my ivory tower. I wanted to act, to give, to make a difference. Joey and Michelle became an anchor in my life, grounding me in ways I hadn't thought possible. Joey's boundless curiosity and Michelle's quiet strength reminded me daily of the resilience and beauty in the human spirit. My days, once filled with board meetings and investment strategies, now revolved around finding ways to support them, and others like them. I began attending events at the nonprofit organization I had partnered with for Michelle's job training. Seeing the impact of their work firsthand inspired me to do more. I met families struggling to make ends meet, young children with dreams far bigger than their circumstances, and mothers like Michelle who carried the weight of their families with grace and determination. One evening, as I walked through the organization's small office, I noticed a young girl drawing on a scrap piece of paper. Her picture was of a house, colorful and detailed, with smiling faces in every window. "That's beautiful," I said, crouching down beside her. "Who lives in this house?" She grinned, holding up the picture proudly. "It's my family," she said. "One day, we'll have a house like this." Her words stayed with me long after I left the office. She wasn't just drawing a house, she was drawing hope. It reminded me of Joey's quiet resilience, his ability to see possibility even when faced with difficulty. I knew then that I wanted to do more, not just for Joey and Michelle, but for others who needed that spark of hope. I called a meeting with my financial advisor the next day. I want to start a foundation, I said, the conviction in my voice surprising even me. A foundation, he repeated, raising an eyebrow. For what purpose? For families, I said. For education, housing, job training, anything that gives people like Joey and Michelle the chance to thrive. He hesitated, his gaze searching mine. This is a significant commitment, Linda. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything, I said firmly. This is what I want my legacy to be. The process of establishing the foundation was both daunting and exhilarating. I poured my energy into every detail, from the mission statement to the partnerships we would forge. Joey and Michelle became the heart of the project, their stories shaping the programs we designed. I wanted the foundation to reflect their strength, their determination, their kindness. Joey, of course, was thrilled when I told him about the foundation. Does this mean more kids get to do cool stuff like me? He asked, his eyes wide with excitement. It means that, and so much more, I said, smiling. It means kids like you can chase their dreams without worrying about what's holding them back. He beamed, his enthusiasm infectious. Can I help? You already have, I said, ruffling his hair. As the foundation grew, so did my connection with Michelle and Joey. Michelle began working as an ambassador for the foundation, sharing her story at events and inspiring others with her journey. Watching her step into the spotlight was a joy I hadn't anticipated. She spoke with such grace and authenticity, her voice steady even as she recounted the struggles she had overcome. Joey, meanwhile, continued to thrive. His STEM program became a launching pad for bigger dreams, and I watched with pride as he excelled in every challenge thrown his way. His latest project, a solar-powered water filtration system, was already gaining attention from his mentors. One evening, as Michelle and I sat in her living room, sipping tea while Joey tinkered with his project, she looked at me thoughtfully. You've changed, she said. I raised an eyebrow, surprised. How so? You're different from the woman I met that day at the door, she said. There's lightness in you now. Purpose. Her words struck a chord. She was right. For years, I had been weighed down by the pressures of success, by the gnawing emptiness I couldn't quite name. But now, that emptiness had been filled, not with things, but with meaning. I think I've found what I was looking for, I said quietly. Michelle smiled, her eyes warm. I'm glad. As the foundation celebrated its 6-month anniversary, I stood in front of a crowd of donors, partners, and beneficiaries, my heart full. The event was held in the same city where I had first met Joey, and I couldn't help but think of how far we had come. I spoke about the boy who had given me his jacket on a cold winter day, about the way his kindness had changed the trajectory of my life. Joey sat in the front row, beaming with pride, his presence a constant reminder of why I had started this journey. We all have the power to change lives, I said, my voice steady. Sometimes, it starts with something as small as a jacket. Sometimes, it starts with a single act of kindness. After the event, Joey ran up to me, his excitement bubbling over. You were amazing, he said. Everyone loved your speech. I laughed, pulling him into a hug. Thank you, Joey. But this is all because of you. You're the one who started it. He pulled back, his expression serious. Does that mean I'm, like, the boss of the foundation? I chuckled. Something like that. That night, as I returned to my penthouse, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The boy who had once given me his jacket had given me something far greater. He had given me a purpose, a chance to rewrite my story. And now, I was determined to pay that forward, to ensure that kindness could ripple out into the world in ways I had never imagined. The foundation became the centerpiece of my life. What had begun as a response to guilt over Joey's kindness had blossomed into a mission that gave me more fulfillment than I had ever imagined. My days, once consumed by the endless pursuit of wealth, now revolved around people, children like Joey, parents like Michelle, and the communities we were slowly but surely empowering. But amidst the growth of the foundation and the endless swirl of activity, I often found myself thinking about the past, about the person I had been before Joey handed me his jacket on that cold winter day. I remembered the hardened, self-sufficient woman who had believed that the world was a game to be won, that vulnerability was a weakness to be buried. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone I viewed with equal parts compassion and pity. I often wondered, if I hadn't met Joey, would I have stayed that person forever? Would I have ever learned what it meant to truly connect, to give, to love without expectation? One afternoon, as I reviewed a proposal for a new mentorship program at the foundation, Joey and Michelle stopped by my office. Joey had come straight from school, his backpack slung over one shoulder and his notebook filled with sketches of his latest invention. He bounded into the room with the energy of someone who hadn't yet learned the weight of the world. "I have an idea," he announced, dropping his notebook onto my desk. "What if we make solar-powered jackets? You know, for people who live outside, so they can stay warm even in the winter?" His enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself smiling. "That's a brilliant idea, Joey. Tell me more." As he explained the mechanics of his concept, I felt a wave of pride. Joey wasn't just dreaming big, he was dreaming in ways that could make a tangible difference. Watching him reminded me of why I had started this journey, to support children like him, to give them the tools and opportunities they needed to change the world. When he finished his explanation, he looked at me expectantly. "Do you think we can do it?" "I think we can do anything," I said, ruffling his hair. "Especially with you leading the charge." Later, as I walked them to the elevator, Michelle pulled me aside. "He looks up to you so much," she said. "You've given him more than I ever could have imagined." I shook my head. "He's given me just as much, Michelle. Probably more." Her smile was soft, knowing. "It's funny, isn't it? How life works. Sometimes the smallest moments have the biggest impact." I nodded, my throat tightening with emotion. "Yes. It's funny, and humbling." As the foundation grew, so did my sense of purpose. But with that growth came a deeper understanding of what it meant to leave a legacy. It wasn't just about the programs we funded or the lives we touched, it was about the connections we built, the ripple effects of kindness that could extend far beyond anything we could measure. One evening, as I stood in my penthouse overlooking the city, I found myself reflecting on how much my life had changed. The wealth and power that had once defined me now felt secondary, almost incidental. What mattered most were the people, Joey, Michelle, the countless families whose lives had intersected with mine. For the first time, I felt truly at peace with who I was and the path I had chosen. The final transformation came unexpectedly, on a quiet afternoon at the Foundation's community center. A young girl approached me, her hands clutching a small drawing. She was shy, barely speaking above a whisper as she handed me the picture. It was a simple sketch of a tree, its branches wide and filled with birds. "It's beautiful," I said, crouching down to meet her eyes. "Is this your favorite tree?" She nodded. "It's strong," she said. "Like you." Her words brought tears to my eyes. In that moment, I realized that the foundation wasn't just a vehicle for change, it was a reflection of the person I had become. A person I was finally proud to be. That evening, I invited Joey and Michelle to my home for the first time. I wanted them to see where I lived, to understand that the woman they had come to know wasn't hiding anymore. As they stepped into the penthouse, Joey's eyes widened. "Whoa," he said, spinning in a circle. "You live here?" "I do," I said, smiling. "But it's just a place. What matters most is who's in it." Michelle placed a hand on my arm, her expression warm. "Thank you, Linda. For everything." "No," I said, my voice steady. "Thank you. For letting me be part of your lives." We spent the evening laughing, sharing stories, and dreaming about the future. Joey's solar-powered jacket project was already taking shape, and Michelle spoke excitedly about the workshops she was leading at the community center. It was a glimpse of the life I had always wanted but hadn't known how to create, a life filled with love, connection, and purpose. As I watched Joey and Michelle that night, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had given me a second chance, not just to help others, but to find myself. And for that, I would always be grateful. In the days that followed, I hung Joey's jacket in a place of honor in my living room. It was no longer a symbol of guilt but a reminder of the moment that had changed everything. It was a testament to the power of kindness, to the idea that even the smallest acts can spark transformations we never see coming. And as I stood in front of it, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here, I realized that my story wasn't about redemption or atonement. It was about learning to live with an open heart, about embracing the connections that make us human. It was, finally, about love. If you've enjoyed my story, please leave your comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, where your support means the world to me. I look forward to bringing you more stories that inspires growth, joy, and purpose. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.